The Athene Real Talk Podcast explores controversial ideas to stimulate debate and active thinking. These ideas do not always reflect Athene's personal views. Welcome to the Athene Real Talk Podcast.
He has been called the best gamer in the world, hands down.
World-famous gamer and philanthropist Athene.
Gaming for Good, it's called, has raised more than $20 million.
Using his notoriety to raise money for charity.
On activism, science, culture, and self-development.
Proud to have him in the studio today. I would not want to take you on in a video game.
Rift says, hey Athene, a lot of people have this moment where they go, I'm gonna change myself today, and a day or a week or a month after this motivation is gone. It's a good question, and I'm gonna give a good answer to it because it relates to a lot to making sense. There's a lot of people, including here, like several people that said like, it's crazy how I'm in that flow of doing really stuff that makes sense and then suddenly I lose it. I lose it completely and I fall back into my old habits and start doing stupid shit. And then afterwards I feel so bad, but I have so much harder time to get back to that, clear, sharp mind. How do I do it? What do I do? What happens? Because that's how you do make sense your core value. Like for people that have a lot of stuff that do make sense, making sense your core value is not so much of a journey. It can happen quite quickly, right? But for people that have gone through life in a way that doesn't make always that much sense, it is harder to start strengthening the neural pathways that do make sense. And basically, the answer is what neuroplasticity is. Neuroplasticity basically is as your neural activity strengthens the neural pathway that are connected to it, and by doing so, they become more and more wider. So as a result, when you experience these certain thoughts or certain feelings, they're just more part of your consciousness. It's like a certain tone in a music, like let's say you have a certain music song, right? That one tone is much louder than other tones. Like you have layers of sound and one sound layer is much louder. So the more you are firing these neurons, so the more you are in that specific state, the louder it becomes, to put it that way. And the more represented it becomes in your consciousness. But consciousness is an ever-changing unit. Like depending on where the neural activity is, you are a different person. You're actually constantly a different person. Every moment you're a different person. And that's why sometimes you can be very clear-minded and very sharp because certain parts of your brain are active, and then afterwards you can be completely someone different because for some reason you've been distracted or whatever. Another part of your brain that is less rational or less making sense is active, and then suddenly that's what you become. Because you are your neural activity, nothing more, nothing less. But being aware of that process, what it allows you is it allows you to understand how important it is to keep the flow going, to try to keep staying in the mind of making sense. And how do you do that? By first of all being aware of what I just said, but also by knowing that everything can make sense. Everything, all your actions, even if you rest or if you need to take a break. Like there is no such a thing as I make sense now and now I take a break of making sense and I can do something really, stupid or whatever. No, making sense is something you can do every single moment. Even if you take a break or you rest, it's because it's the most effective thing to do. It's like sleeping. You're not gonna beat yourself up for sleeping or saying like, oh, when I'm sleeping, I'm not making sense. Like that doesn't make sense. And that is where you can completely destroy the duality. Because the reason why I'm talking this is because it happened to Nolan. Nolan had the idea of like vacation mindset. Like he works during the day, makes sense. And then if he's not as productive anymore, he can take vacation, right? And as a result, in the vacation mindset, he lets go all the stuff that makes sense. And then it starts, strengthening these other neural pathways. Just as a result, while he's making sense, he's actually looking forward and experiences a lot of dizziness because he wants to be that other person that is just on holiday mindset. But the key is to realize that making sense is something that applies all the time. There is no such a thing as a mindset to not make sense. Even resting and even taking care of like working out, all these other things can make sense on its own way. And if you have that, you can keep that flow going. Even if you're less sharp, you just start doing things that make more sense, so it doesn't guide the activity to the parts in you that are connected to bad habits and all the other shit. And if you're really aware of that, you can overcome it and you can quite quickly, grow quite strong. Because everybody has parts in him that do make sense. And the only thing you gotta do is activate them. That's it. Yeah, Elnor TV, actually what you're saying there, like Athene, I'm now experiencing extreme duality. At times I feel like the world makes sense and I can tackle anything. Then the next second I'm in my old way of thinking and can't seem to get back. Any tips? Actually, this is what I was going to talk about today. I've written it down. A lot of people go through life with, okay, I have a working mindset, which means I get my shit done that I have to do in order to survive, and then I have a vacation mindset. And the vacation mindset, I enjoy life, I enjoy what I've worked for, right? You have that duality. I work, and then I can enjoy. Your working mindset, vacation mindset, right? Duality. So now when I talk about making sense, what do people do? They go like, oh, the working mindset, they try to replace that with making sense. They try to like create some layer. And when they made enough sense for the day, they go like, okay, vacation mindset. But the thing is, the making sense mindset replaces the working mindset and the vacation mindset, both of them. And that's how you keep making sense. That's how you stay in the flow. And that means that also like taking time for yourself and resting, you start doing that in a way that makes sense. And that way, you never have to lose your flow. Because the reason why you first make sense and you feel really great and sharp and then you start losing it is because you shift from that making sense, more active oriented mindset into a more passive one, because you assume, now I've done enough work, now I can just, not make so much sense anymore. And then it starts firing all these neural pathways that are connected with it, and boom, there you go. You lose all your momentum you've had. It's all about momentum. Keep making sense, and even resting and taking time does make sense. I mean, like if you're tired, like if I tell you like, yeah, you need to go to sleep, you might also argue, yeah, but doesn't it make more sense if I would just keep working and I don't sleep? No, you'd say like, that's crazy, right? Same with, taking rest and being able to combine that with stuff that is more productive, watching Cosmos or whatever. And that's the key, to never lose the making sense mindset. Even while you're resting, even while you're chilling. Isn't that beautiful? That is really the answer to your issue that you've had. If your experience thinks something differently, you gotta figure out what that is. You can't just impose things. That's something also that people have to realize. Like if you experience dissonance and you don't really know where it comes from, it means you don't fully understand, and therefore it doesn't fully make sense to you. But the moment it just fully makes sense to you, it's so easy, it's so clear what to do. So if you, for example, say like, it makes so much sense, this is important, but this is an important one. Let's say you say, it makes so much sense for me to not play games, yet still, I feel like I want to play games. That means that it doesn't make fully sense for you to not playing games. And you might say like, that doesn't make sense. Yes, it makes sense. Because the drive and the need of you to play games is something you haven't fully understood yet. The moment that you can make sense out of you playing games is when you can start tackling it. And that means like starting to understand why you play games, the reason why you play games. And then that's really like, it's quite a structured process. So whenever you feel dissonance about like, oh, this doesn't make sense, yet why do I have the feeling to do that? It's because you don't fully understand. Like if, for example, your drive, your core value is comfort or having fun, then of course playing games makes a lot of sense. And the problem is not so much playing games, it's rather you valuing comfort above making sense, which actually goes against being comfortable. It's like the guy sitting on his sofa thinking like, yeah, this is the most comfortable thing, but it gets, more and more obese, and then starts wondering like, this is not what I want, yet I can't get out of the sofa because I want to be comfortable. But that's because you value comfort more than making sense. And the moment you start realizing that, you start going like, wait, it actually is better for me, for my own comfort, to stand up and start working out and eating healthy. And the moment you start realizing that, you automatically start taking action without feeling like, man, I want to sit on the sofa. No, because you understand why you want to, because you understand where it comes from and such. Argon says, is making sense equal to doing things with the most expected value? Argon, making sense is merely aligning your beliefs with reality. And since reality is brought about through mathematical patterns that bring about the consistency of reality, which then brings about the consistency of your neural networks, which brings about the consistency of your feelings and your thoughts. Aligning using the same logic that brings about reality allows you to be more in line with reality, and as a result, more in line with yourself. And right now, we really experience a duality between what we think and what we feel. The prefrontal cortex and the more primitive part of the brain is in constant duality. And as a result, what it does is like your more subconscious part tries to then, create ideas or beliefs like God or whatever to explain things, to make sense of things, right? But the thing is, like, as we evolve through time, we've come to a time where we start understanding the brain, understanding our limitations, but also understand a lot about reality. And as a result, we can make sense of our foundation, our more subconscious, feelings, and make this duality dissolve. And it really makes you feel more like a unity. It makes you feel more like one unit. One of my biggest advantages is not so much that I'm more intelligent or smarter or whatever than anybody else. It's mainly because I don't experience this duality. I can be so much more sharper because I'm more calibrated with myself. And it allows me to have more working memory, more thoughts. I see things more clear. But everybody has the ability to do that. But having that duality within you causes a lot of noise. And as a result, you're less sharp, you're less able, you're less capable. Making sense allows you to align these more primitive parts with reality through our understanding. And as a result, they align and they don't start creating conflict within ourselves. And that is why we evolved to even experience dissonance, because by doing so, we align ourselves more easily with reality. And that's why we are now taking over the entire planet. Because, back in the days, it happened more biologically and instincts. And if something didn't work out, it just died. But because of our ability to reason, we have actually gotten an extra tool to align ourselves with reality. And that's why we experience all these inner conflict. A dog or a cat doesn't have this inner conflict because they don't have these more intellectual parts of their brain. They don't have that inner conflict the way we do have it. Being able to align it is what, creates this unity, and making sense is the way you do that. And knowledge and learning, of course, has a big part in it. Like, it goes hand in hand. Because the more knowledge you have, the more insight you have, the more self-knowledge you have as well, the more you can actually, undo certain bad social conditioning and start, making things more click. Why are we here? Does that make sense to you? Is there no reason why we are here? Of course it makes sense that we are here. It depends, of course. Like, if I explain it through evolutionary biology, right? That we've come to where we are, you start asking the question like, yeah, but if we are the result from Stardust, where did that come? From the Big Bang? How did the Big Bang happen? And then what you have to start going is like, it's basically pushing the edge of what is unknown to the boundaries of what science knows, right? And that is then for some people that like to believe in absolute truths, a way for them to justify their beliefs, right? To justify their conviction, because they go like, hey, there you go. But it's flawed, and let me tell you why it's flawed. Because if you just take science and you start looking at the foundation of reality, and you start going smaller and smaller and smaller, and you start seeing like electrons and photons and quarks and all this shit, all these quantum particles, and you start seeing how they behave in a fundamental probabilistic way, you start realizing that on a fundamental level, reality itself is probabilistic. So since everything is probabilistic, you won't be able to find an answer anyway, like 100% true answer. The best answer you'll get is a statistical one, is a probability. So if a probability answer is one of the answers, then what happened before the Big Bang, even the Big Bang itself is also probabilistic. There is no certainty. Even when you're doing like a scientific experiment, there is no certainty that this has happened. The moment you let go absolute truths is the moment you can start thinking freely. And that's also why it's the second chapter in the book. The second chapter in the book is about absolute truths, because the problem here is not so much whether or not there is a reason of us to exist. The problem that you're talking about is whether or not you believe in an absolute truth, and therefore you want to find a true answer to the question. But the moment you let go the idea of a true answer, you don't care so much about what is true or what is false. You just start thinking more practically, and you start thinking, what is more practical to me? It's a very important insight. And that's why I talk about it at the start of the book. Because as long as you're stuck in the idea of absolute truths, you're basically trapped into denial. It's a very big, important insight. Athene, so you mean out past self. So you say we are supposed to reflect on the past, but at the same time we are supposed to let go on the past since we are not the same person anymore. I'm a bit confused. Okay, I can perfectly define. You have to let go about the emotional connection of the past, but you still have to hold on the information and experience you got from it. And it's two different things. You have the emotion and you have the thought. And you have to detach both. The moment you detach both, you can just look at your experience as information and learn from it. The moment you're too emotionally invested, you carry it around everywhere. So it's about looking at your past as a book and not be attached to it. So that's why you let go on an emotional level, but you still, keep it as a reference. I'm Captain Athene. I've been lurking for so long. Do you think dropping studies is a smart idea to join your crew? It's very hard for me to answer that question. The best thing I can answer is if I would ask the people here, because you got quite some people that stopped going to university, and I would ask, would you keep going to university? I'll say like, you fucking crazy. I learned more in 1 year here than what I've learned in my entire life. What am I gonna go? Like in university you don't learn shit. But on the other hand, it depends from person to person. If you aren't fully ready to work in this environment, then dropping your studies can be a bad idea. But it's all about knowing yourself and what you want. If what you want is having a very big impact and really grow as a person, then working in this environment is much more productive. But at the same time, if you're very insecure and there's a lot of still work to do on yourself, then university can be a nice bridge situation where you acquire this self-knowledge. But it's all depending, you define basically whether or not it's a good idea. Where do you see your goals as a group in 5 years? My goals will always be the same. It's to have the biggest impact. To have the biggest impact relative to what you can. Sabelar, when I say having the biggest impact, sometimes people can misunderstand it. Like, let's say you got a truck, right? And I say, what is the biggest impact? You would say like, yeah, the truck can carry so much weight, so I can move so much in such an amount of time, right? What if I tell you like, but isn't the biggest impact moving the mountain? Be like, no, you can't, because the truck can't handle the mountain. It's logical, right? You look at what you have, the capacity, and you translate that to the biggest impact. And a lot of people don't do that about themselves. They do that with lifting weights, right? You go to the fitness and you go like, yeah, of course I can't lift 100 whatever kilograms because I gotta build it up, right? It makes a lot of sense. But when it comes down to willpower and to insight and to psychological things, people suddenly drop all this. Even though the brain works very similar through neuroplasticity, you strengthen neural pathways. It's like lifting. So when you think about what is the biggest impact you can have, the biggest impact you can have is not going and work 14 hours a day like a hardcore maniac if you don't have the capacity, the mental capacity to do so. And that's why sometimes working out mentally by, thinking about these things and doing self-development and such can really increase your capacity and overall output. And that is something a lot of people sometimes forget. And knowing yourself and learning about yourself and knowing what you want and aligning these beliefs and making sense of your core value is quite very, actually explains quite a lot and really helps you, can really help you in a big way to define direction. Doing so, is exactly what enables you to not be blinded by the impact we have. It's like you go to the fitness and you see someone working out with 200 kilogram weights and you go like, fuck. Like, I can't do that, and you just go back home. It's because you see yourself more like, when we think about psychology and we think about capacity and impact, we have a lot of wrong social conditioned ideas about identity and ego and how, you gotta be better and this and that, but it's bullshit. You just have the potential to grow, and teaching and learning and growing towards your potential is what allows you to achieve great things, not looking at, the end outcome and go like, oh, I can't do this, therefore I'm not motivated. It's about how you can improve yourself, and knowing yourself and knowing how you can grow is part of that. And that's why it's important that, making sense means when you experience this dissonance, you look it up, you start thinking about it, and by doing so, you can actually enable you to actually start working on that. This is a post on the Reddit, and he says, let's take Athene and gaming for example, the two things that connect all of us. A core value Athene has is making the world a better place, contributing to society and helping people. And the thing is, what I just want to say is I don't have a core value to make the world a better place, contributing to society, or helping people. I actually don't care about all three. Couldn't care less about helping other people or making the world a better place or contributing to society. And you might wonder, what do you mean with you couldn't care less about doing that? Because why are you doing it? The thing is, I don't have an emotional attachment to helping the world become a better place. I have no emotional attachment whatsoever. If I raise money for charity, I don't see the kids. I don't see them. I don't care. There is no emotion in me that gets triggered because I see a bar go up on Gaming for Good. So you might wonder, why do you do it then? The reason why I contribute to society and I do what I do is because it makes sense. It's not because it's my core value, but it's because it makes sense. And the reason why it makes sense is because I understand evolutionary biology and what I am. Because your actions flow out of what you are. It's like a printer prints paper, because that's what it is. I do what I do, I evolve, I move forward, because that's what I'm designed to do. And since I have a very big picture about what I am, that's why I do what I do. And what am I goes really back to the Big Bang. And you might say, like, what does that mean? Like, how is the Big Bang related to what you are? Everything that has gone previous to bring about what I am is part of the entire picture of what I am. And if you want to fully understand what you are, you got to go all the way back. You got to understand how life has created, how life evolved. And that starts explaining why we have certain emotional attachments. That's why we have emotions like love, or that's why, we have fear, because we evolved and that allowed us to survive. And if you go even back to the Big Bang, it even, explains why you need freaking universe, and you start understanding quantum mechanics and all that shit, because you start understanding like what even brings about life and all that shit. So basically, if you want to have a full picture of what you are, you don't really have to understand the entire universe, because a lot of it is, redundant information. But being able to understand a lot allows you to put yourself in a bigger picture. So like your language, for example, or your thinking. Like a lot of people have the idea that when they go through life, they are their, social conditioning. And they don't question so much. They don't even question that. But the problem is, when you look at what you are and where things come from, the picture is much bigger, much wider. And just as much as, cells in your body bring about what you are, trillions of cells, just as much billions of people bring about society. And if you start disconnecting yourself because you have an idea of the self and you say, this is what I am, it's just not in line. It's dysfunctional belief. You're not just this guy running around. No, you're the product of literally billions of years of evolution. That's what you are. And the moment you start realizing that, and you start realizing that you can't know yourself without knowing where you came from, you start understanding that everything is connected. Everything is connected in a very, very concrete way, in a very scientific way. It's not just, everything is connected from a spiritual way. No, it's scientific. In order to create a pie, you first have to create the Big Bang. It's a very known saying of Carl Sagan. I know that I don't quote stuff, but the reason why I'm quoting is because it really nicely summarizes the idea that you can't just look at yourself and think like, oh yeah, my dad and my mommy made me and that's what I am. So my dad and my mommy knows like your dad and your mommy, they, there's a lot of stuff that comes before that as well. And getting that picture allows you to understand what you are and what you're designed to do. So that is what making sense is to me. That's why I do try to improve the world and such. So if someone says like, yeah, he just has core values of like, doing, changing the world, whatever, that's not true. So like, and then he says like, if you have core values to play games, then you just play games. That's not true, because you're not designed to play games. But you first have to understand these things though. So it's not like, because it's not like that therefore you suddenly have to stop playing games. It's not that simple. You gotta understand these things. And the other thing I wanted to say, and this is something that a lot of people have to be aware of as well, if you have two highly intelligent people that talk to each other and are able to put in words their experience, they will always come to the same conclusion or very similar conclusions, because their knowledge will start becoming equal, and therefore their conclusion will become very similar or equal. So yeah, I had today a talk with Stas, and he was talking about making sense, and he was saying something that I found really interesting. Because whenever I talk about making sense and finding the map and such, like what you basically have is, it's quite a slow approach. It's not an instant state of being, although it can sometimes be. But the thing is, the way I experience making sense is quite intensive. It's quite in the moment. It's quite there. It's tangible. It's really real. And whenever I hear people talk about it, I go like, okay, yeah, this can help, this can work, but I feel like on a certain level that it doesn't fully click on an emotional level, on a subconscious emotional level, and that it's mainly the concepts that clicked. Like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, this and that, but on a subconscious level, it doesn't click that much. And I talked about it in the past, about inner child and such, but what was really interesting is that when Stas talked to me, he was the first one to explain it to me in this environment, how I, would experience it myself. Let's say I would be, another version of myself, and I would get into it. So basically, I will just explain what he said. And he's still working on how to put it in words though. But I thought I'll give it a shot. I will just give you guys the experience he went through, and then I will explain how he did it. And maybe some people can be helped by it. So basically what he said is like, the moment he heard that it was more an emotional thing and less a rational thing, he started stopping really thinking about it very rationally, because he was really breaking his head like, yeah, making sense, this and that, but it didn't really, click with him. And he was wondering like, Athene is saying this is a big deal and stuff. I must be missing something, because he really tried very hard. Like, does this make sense? Does this make sense? He was really like breaking his head over it. And I talked to him and I said like, no, like, but the moment when he saw the emotional ones, it was okay, let's try to go about it emotionally. So he was really going about it like, yeah, okay, so he was really trying to meditate on it and go like, okay, so making sense, you can trust it. You can really, feel safe. It's always there. It has answers to everything. And what he said is like a combination of that, really the understanding of making sense on a really, emotional level, that you can just trust it and you can just feel safe, and that it's everywhere. It's all around you. Like everything makes sense. Together with the ability to look at all his issues and all his, like from a third perspective. You just see that, you wonder like, okay, this is what's going on. This all makes sense. So you're really reflecting on it by looking at everything. So you're not trapped in your ideas and thoughts. No, you're looking at everything. You go like, yeah, this all makes sense. I can trust it. Everything is going to be all right. Together with being in the present, he said that combination, of course, he's writing it down, he's thinking more about it, like really gave him a very crazy insight. He clicked with it emotionally. Like at a certain moment, making sense became his core value for just a few minutes. And then it turns off again. But the moment he did it for one time, because he did it once and he saw it and he clicked into it on an emotional level, like, whoa, he just keeps reminding himself of it because he can more easily get into it. And he says the moment that he makes that click, the moment that he absorbs that core value, that suddenly, from one moment to another, you feel super, super clear. You feel like you can handle the world. There's nothing that can stop you. You're super machine-like. And he says, I completely understand you. And that's when I got it, like, okay, because he said like all the time when I look at you, I'm always like a little bit puzzled. Like, how does he do this? How can he come? How is he so rational all the time? How does he like do stuff all the time? And the moment he clicked into it, even for a few minutes, he was basically fully experiencing what it was and understood what my mind state was. And the reason why I'm explaining this is because it means that you can click into it. Of course, there is a way you can go through, which takes more time by conceptualizing, but there's also a way to click on it from a subconscious point of view. And he also said like, yeah, he doesn't have that much noise, but if you're in the moment, you don't have that much noise anyway. But what I'm just trying to explain here is that you can do it instantaneously. And what he also said, what helped him a lot was the motivation and drive to make the click, to make the insight. He really wanted it badly. And I was thinking maybe what I have to do is I have to really inspire and motivate people to want this really badly, because I haven't really been doing that. Because maybe people really wanting this badly, because they know how much it could help them, can really put them in that state, even if it's just for half a minute. And then it's just about remembering yourself and putting yourself back in that state all the time. And as you do so, it becomes more and more what you are, even though you might have a lot of bullshit. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. I don't know if this was helpful for anyone.
Subscribe to youtube.com/AtheneWins. Watch the live stream at twitch.tv/AtheneLive and follow the real Athene on Snapchat.